You're watching The Legal Breakdown. Glenn, Donald Trump was trying one last-ditch effort to protect himself in this upcoming D.C. mini-trial that would expose so much of his criminality ahead of the election. Judge Chutkan just responded to his request. What just happened?
Yeah, so Donald Trump has failed again in court, and Judge Chutkan has cleared the way for Jack Smith to file a, quote, oversized brief, 180 pages, detailing all of Donald Trump's crimes and conduct on and around January 6th. So Judge Chutkan can undertake the important task that the Supreme Court instructed her to undertake. The Supreme Court said, listen, you have to go through all of the evidence, and you, Judge Chutkan, have to figure out which of Donald Trump's crimes and what of his conduct was official presidential conduct versus unofficial conduct. In other words, what should he be immune from prosecution for, and what can he be prosecuted for? And, the legal back and forth in recent days has been really interesting to watch. Jack Smith filed a request to file the 180-page brief, recognizing there's a limit to briefs that are allowed to be filed in federal court in D.C., 45 pages. And if you want to exceed it, you need to seek permission of the court, which, of course, is exactly what Jack Smith did. This caused Donald Trump's legal team to respond with this unhinged, hysterical reply. And I'll bet you can guess one of the sort of main complaints they had: election interference. This is election interference. And I'll tell you, it's brilliant. I recommend this very short 6-page order by Judge Chutkan today. Because first of all, she says, no, I'm granting Jack Smith's motion because I'm required to see all this evidence so I can do what the Supreme Court told me to do. And then she ticks through one after another, 5 in all, of Donald Trump's complaints, and exposes why each of the complaints are, I'm going to use a nice word, nonsense. But here is my favorite. I want to read just one of her replies to Donald Trump's claim of election interference. She said, defense counsel, Trump's attorneys, reframed the problem as an election dispute, insisting that it's incredibly unfair in the sense that they're able to put this stuff, this filing, in the public record at this very sensitive time in our nation's history. But, Judge Chutkan says, defendants' concern with the political consequences of these proceedings does not bear on the pretrial schedule. What needs to happen before or shouldn't happen before the election is not relevant here. Period. So, she has shot down this complaint from the defense over and over and over again. Election interference. She said, no, if I started to make my decisions the way you, defense attorneys, and Donald Trump want me to make them, by resorting to the election schedule and setting things to happen in my case accordingly, that would actually be me, the judge, interfering in the election, and I'm not going to do it.
Glenn, do they not see any irony here in the fact that it was the Trump team itself who had pushed the Supreme Court to actually hand down this presidential immunity ruling? And so now, in the aftermath of that, when it's up to Judge Chutkan to then use that ruling and decide whether Trump's actions were official conduct or unofficial conduct, they also want her not to do that. Like they want to have it both ways, where they both get the advantage of having Trump protected by presidential immunity, but when the trial court actually goes ahead and tries to determine whether these actions fall under the umbrella of presidential immunity, he also balks at that.
Brian, the irony and the hypocrisy is so thick in so much of what Donald Trump and his lawyers do that sometimes I wonder if, when you sign on to become a Donald Trump lawyer, does Donald Trump give you some special irony filtering glasses so that you never are forced to recognize and confront the irony of your own inconsistent positions? But
it's like his dementia test that he brags about, except you have to have a cognitive dissonance test, and if you can pass that with flying colors, then congratulations, you get a spot on his legal team.
Yeah, and I don't blame his attorneys for aggressively offering arguments, even arguments that are sometimes inconsistent, which we see in court all the time. I don't want to go down this little side road or a detour, but in murder cases, Brian, I saw this occasionally when a defense attorney would get up and argue to the jury, my client did not kill the victim. Nothing could be further from the truth, ladies and gentlemen. But if my client did, he did it in self-defense. You know, a jury will look at those two conflicting arguments and reject them both because they see the irony and the hypocrisy and the laughability of those kind of positions. But you know what? Donald Trump's lawyers continue to do it early and often in many of the court pleadings and court appearances.
Now, why is this going to be so significant? The fact that Judge Chutkan has now cleared the runway for Jack Smith to be able to present this 180-page document, to have this mini trial, so to speak, ahead of the November election. Why is this going to be so consequential here?
You know, because we need to keep this prosecution moving forward. It should not come to a grinding halt because we have an upcoming election. And Donald Trump doesn't want to suffer whatever the consequences are of a case being sort of expeditiously litigated when that litigation, you know, involves briefs being filed, as is the case in every single criminal matter, that include proffers of fact. That is exactly how motions, how litigation, pretrial litigation unfolds, as Judge Chutkan pointed out in this order. So, you know, and I maintain it is important for the American people to know as much. This is actually a collateral consequence. It's important for the American voters to know as much as they can about what Donald Trump tried to do to steal the 2020 election, to, you know, completely disregard the expressed will of the voters back in 2020 as they're heading to the polls on November 5th to kind of decide who they're going to cast their vote for this time around. So I do think there is that sort of side benefit of the American people learning more about the crimes of Donald Trump.
Glenn, when is this mini trial supposed to happen? And is there any impediment at this point to it actually moving forward?
Yeah, so the mini trial will probably look like, and I say probably because Judge Chutkan hasn't announced exactly how she will conduct the hearings once these briefs are filed, but it will probably look like Jack Smith filing his brief disclosing all of the evidence of Trump's crimes, the defense responding to the evidence that they see, and then making their best arguments as to why it's all official presidential conduct, so he should be immune for all crimes he committed. And then what I suspect is if there are disputed factual issues and the judge can't resolve whether it's official conduct or not official conduct without taking some testimony, in other words, if it's not fully laid out and explained in the motions that are filed and the arguments that are had between the parties, the prosecution and the defense, then she could very well order an evidentiary hearing and start to have some of the witnesses come in to testify more fully about what was contained in the 180-page pleading that Jack Smith is about to file. So we don't know the exact nature of it. We don't know how long it will take, but what we do know is Judge Chutkan will continue to set deadlines and schedules that have nothing to do with the upcoming election.
All right. Well, we will, of course, stay on top of this issue for as long as it plays out, including if we do see any more impediments or successful efforts by Donald Trump's team to make sure that the American people don't see what we should expect to see in this upcoming hearing. So with that said, for those who are watching right now, if you want to follow along with this stuff, please make sure to subscribe. That's the best way to support both of our work. The links to both of our channels are right here on this screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.